Recording. There we go. So, Lennon, you've got on here probably about 12 people that have traveled most of the time or with you guys at some point in time, probably. So let's talk about Belize and I can pull up the slide, or you can pull slides, or we can just talk. Why don't you tell us a little bit about El Pescador?
Absolutely. El Pescador is located on Ambergris Key, if you were unaware, and that's kind of that one section of island that is off the mainland, to the furthest north on the outside of the barrier reef, basically, that runs north and south of Belize. Another fun fact about this area is Belize and this barrier reef is the second largest in the entire world outside of the Barrier Reef down in Australia. So it's a pretty unique in that sense, and obviously has a ton of wildlife swimming around and existing in that area. So it's pretty cool. Travel in and out of Belize, in my opinion, is pretty easy. The hub is Belize City, so as you're coming into country, everybody has to go through Belize City if you're flying. That's the main hub. That's where the customs exists, all that good stuff. So basically, you'll get in, and it's pretty easy process overall. They kind of have it down to a system. You go through standard customs. You'll grab your bag, and then from there, with El Pescador, your flight is included from there over to Ambergris Key. And the nice thing about that is you don't have to do the water taxi or mess around with boats at all. It's a quick 15-minute flight to get you over to the island, so it's pretty easy. And as you navigate through the main airport, which is in Belize City, you go through, and everybody, if you're collectively kind of getting in around the same time, even if you're not, it's pretty simple. Just go through to the Tropic Air counter, grab your tickets, and then from there, you move into the other area where they have seating arrangements. And as you walk down, there's the Tropic Air counter, and real easy. You go up there, let them know which flight you're on. They'll have you sit down and wait, and they'll get you on the next flight, basically. So, real simple process there. Once you get to Ambergris Key in San Pedro, which is the main city there in Ambergris Key, that airport's pretty small, so it's real simple. You'll hop off the plane, you'll walk over. Literally, they'll just throw all your gear onto a cart, and they'll bring it right over to you. They will give you a little ticket, so make sure you keep that for your actual luggage. And they simply just ask you for that. They'll match it with your luggage, and they'll hand it to you. There will be a El Pescador representative waiting there for you. And what they do is they'll, depending on ocean conditions, like if it happens to be a weird day where it's really rough, doesn't happen often, but they'll get you to the lodge by vehicle. If not, they just throw you in the fast boat, and it takes 7 minutes to get you over the lodge. And they'll drop you right off at the lodge, get you all acquainted. The nice thing that El Pescador does as well is they have an orientation where they'll bring everybody together. They'll let you know everything about the lodge. They'll let you know what to expect during the week as far as your fishing goes. They actually have a big map of Ambergris Key, and they'll show you kind of all the fishing spots and what to expect. And they very much want folks to be as comfortable, and do not be afraid to express any concerns that you have throughout the week or even in the beginning. So if you want to focus on fishing permit, they'll try to pair you with a permit guide that's very enthusiastic with permit. Most of them are all, I'd say, well versed with all species, but you certainly, it's like anything. If you're a permit diehard, they have some guides that are similarly in the same boat, and that's what they want to chase. So they can pair you accordingly. But I'd say just be as honest as possible with the folks there. Um, they're really, really good in that respect. And another nice thing, now that I'm thinking about it, every single evening they'll do casting lessons. So for anybody that's interested in getting a tune-up or wants to improve their casting, anything of that nature, there's always casting instructor in the evenings, and they'll let you know when that is, so that way you can go out there and do some casting with them, which is always, I think, fun and enjoyable for a lot of folks, especially that first night. If you haven't been casting for a while, you can shake off the jitters and do some casting, which is cool. The lodge is nice. They've done some renovations recently. There's a full bar down there. They have a pool table. There's technically 3 pools on location. So as a guest, you're welcome to use any of the pools that are there. Some are quiet because they're kind of just where they're located throughout. They happen to be set in between some of the villas. Then there's a main pool right out front. They have a small kind of shop. So if you happen to forget size 12 tippet, chances are they'll have that there for you. And they have a selection of flies that you can purchase. They also have kind of a handful of rods and reels that are able to be used throughout the week. If you happen to want to try one of their Orvis endorsed. So if you happen to want to try a rod, it is strictly based on first come, first serve. So they don't have, I'd say, one for everyone, but if you're happen to want to use something, they'll have it there for you. Outside of that, moving into kind of the fishery, and Bobby, stop me if there's a point you want to chat about something specifically, but I'll just keep moving along.
I'll keep going, man.
Awesome. So the fishery itself, it's very diverse. It is one area that is considered kind of a grand slam potential. They have bonefish, they have tarpon, they have permit, there's snook running around. They also have some jack crevalle. You'll find barracuda kind of randomly popping up here and there, so it's nice to be prepared for any and all species if you have the ability. I generally, when I'm down there, I travel with at least 3 rods kind of ready to go. There's usually a bonefish rod, permit rod, and a tarpon rod, or the tarpon rod kind of will pull double duty with jacks and snook. And then if you're real quick, you can cut off your tarpon fly and then throw on a wire bite for some barracuda as well. So that's going to be a nice option in the mix, but certainly be prepared for bonefish, permit, and tarpon at any given moment to try to get that slam if that's of interest to you. If not, absolutely you can set up any of your rods any way you like. The fishery itself, the cool thing about Ambergris Key is like you have the inner lagoon on the backside that goes into Chetumal Bay, and then on the outside is obviously the ocean side, and you will find fish existing in both. So that area specifically, unlike as you head further south into Belize, that ocean portion on Ambergris Key, and as it pushes up into Mexico, the taper, or I guess the depth of that water as it pushes out into the ocean isn't as steep. So it's kind of got a slow gradient as it's hitting that reef out there, which in turn allows for a pretty unique fishery in that you'll find permit, tarpon, and bonefish right along that ocean edge, working in and around kind of the beach sections. And there's plenty of grass and I'd say like coral heads and stuff like that out there that you'll find these fish, which is really, really cool. And then adversely on the backside with the bay section, similarly, you'll find those same fish kind of in and around the mangroves or in little sand coves. You'll find them in back little lagoons, stuff of that nature. There's some inner lagoons within the key itself that also holds tarpon. So there's opportunity for folks if there's any interest fishing out of a canoe. There's one of the local guides there that he tends to be the head guide running things, but you can potentially ask them to take you in the canoe and they'll hop in the golf cart, take you back into I guess there's an area what they call the secret beach. It's not really a secret, but there's a road that leads there. You hop in and You can fish tarpon, snook, even occasionally find some bonefish back in the lagoon. It's pretty fun. I'd say it's for the individuals that have a pretty good balance. As you can imagine, standing up in a canoe can be a little difficult. Um, I'm personally 6'6", so I'm a little top heavy in that regard, but I do have fairly good balance for my size. But even I was feeling a little tippy running around with the guide because he's basically in the back just pulling along. Um, but it was a cool experience nonetheless. Um, Outside of that, I'd say, I mean, that's kind of the bulk in a nutshell. I'm trying to think if there's anything major that I'm missing.
Yeah, we
There's
picked
certainly,
the yeah, we picked the dates because toward the end of April, toward the end of April, and then when it gets into May is when the larger tarpon start migrating in. So we picked the dates to take advantage of the more resident tarpon, the smaller, the 20, 30, 40 pound tarpon versus being there when, and they can still show up, the 100, 120 pound tarpon show up. Because I think from my conversations, everybody would prefer to catch a 30 pound tarpon versus a 130 pound tarpon to make it a little bit easier, get them off the line quicker and catch another one.
that's absolutely right. And another thing about April is you tend to see a good push of permit kind of showing up in larger mass just because they're prepping for their spawn that usually takes place in May and June. So you tend to see a lot more schools congregating around that time frame as well, which I think we were kind of focusing it a bit on just to give more opportunities. But yeah, to your point, plenty of juvenile, as they're called, kind of anything in that 5 to 40 pound range, and then once they reach about 60 pounds is when they're technically considered an adult and they can start migrating. But yeah, you'll certainly find fish of that size running around. Any specific questions? I guess in regard to the lodge or the fishery that I could help answer for anyone.
And let
If
me,
you,
Landon, I've got
would
a
you,
question.
would you mention the weight of the rods needed
Uh,
for the bonefish tarpon and permit in April and May?
Absolutely. So I would say you're kind of in the sweet spot if you're anywhere from 8 to 10 weights. I tend to, and even a 7 weight for bonefish, that tends to be pretty common these days, depending on the rod itself. There's a lot of fast action rods out there that do really, really well at a 7 weight. Um, so that's become pretty popular. So yeah, 7 and 8 weights for bonefish. Permit, I tend to be in the 9 to 10 range. Just depends on preference there. Um, I tend to lean towards a 9 more than anything. I just like the feel and being able to make a cast effectively and efficiently to those fish. Where 10 is super nice in the wind. I will give the 10 weight that. It's very nice to cast in the wind, just because you have a little more oomph there. But it tends to. I got to really slow myself down with the 10 weight if it happens to be calmer conditions because the fly just wants to plop a little bit more and spook fish. So that's why I tend to favor a 9. But all personal preference there, 9 and 10s. And then when it comes to the baby tarpon and snook, ideally a 9 and a 10 weight. It's kind of the same deal, just depending on what you have in your quiver.
and floating line.
Predominantly, everything's going to be floating. The only thing you would need a somewhat of a sinking style line for is the migratory tarpon, having like an intermediate line. And sometimes, depending on conditions, they tend to be deep in the channels. So you might have a sinking line for that if you don't mind uh, casting and then letting your fly sink down as you're retrieving back to yourself. You can get quite a few eats that way. But if there is large tarpon around, generally speaking, the areas that they run to predominantly are to the south called Long Key, and there's a handful of areas around there. There's one spot they call Miami Beach, and a couple others that have shallower flats, kind of similar to the Keys. if you will. But they don't have quite the migration of fish moving consistently like the Keys do. But it's pretty cool to see those fish push on those shallower flats through. But that's the only thing you kind of need a sinking line. But everything else, absolutely. Floating lines, depending on what you like as far as a brand goes. There's a lot of options out there, but that's the route I'd go.
So crab patterns for the permit.
Predominantly crabs for the permit. They do one kind of sneaker fly, I'd say, that plays both realms as far as bonefish and permit go is am I drawing a blank? The squimp, sorry. The squimp is one that does well with both. Because sometimes you do have permit that are kind of focused on shrimp, and you'll throw crabs at them and they don't want anything to do with it. And then you throw the squimp, which is more of a shrimpy looking thing, and they'll gobble that thing up. So keep
Those
that in
going to be
mind.
on 2s, 4s, or 6s, or take all varying sizes.
All varying sizes. I'd say with the squimp, I tend to favor, at least for the permit, the 2s and 4s, but the bonefish tend to favor it in size 6. So I usually have the whole gamut if I can help it. But crab pattern specifically for the permit, that's just what they like to be munching on predominantly.
Any particular crab pattern?
The strong arm is a very popular one. The strong arm is, I think the fly tire is Skok, Skok. But if you look in or type in strong arm, you'll see it's from Umpqua.
Okay.
Very popular pattern down there.
I got a question. How many rods will be at the lodge at one time during? Are we the only group, or are there multiple groups? And does it look like the Bassmasters tournament in the morning so everybody leaves the dock? What does that look like?
It varies year to year, but from what I understand, with your group specifically, you're kind of one of the few as of right now. But Ambergris Key there's a lot of real estate there. So, and then there's other lodges on the island as well. So I wouldn't say necessarily that it'll be Bassmaster quite, but I mean, given the size of your group, depending on how big it gets, you'll have that to contend with, and then there'll be a handful of other boats on the island. But they generally, as guides, they're all pretty. They got their areas picked out, and they have a lot of backups, and they know if there's been an area that's fishing well. They have some areas that they know to kind of avoid for that reason, because they know a lot of other guides are heading there. They're well versed in that respect and can get you and go find fish all over that entire span, because they have all of Ambergris Key up till the Mexico border, and then they can also head south. So there's a lot of cool spots south, and the keys down there, various keys that they can kind of hit as well. So you tend to not run into too many people.
So for tarpon, toads, bunnies, what do you use?
Yep, I'd focus on those patterns are great. Yeah, any of the smaller, like the tarpon tapas, is I think another one from Umpqua that's really good. Rio makes the Dread Pirate. That one's a cool one. It has some foam in the face with some deer hair that keeps it towards the surface, so you get to see a lot of those eats, which is cool. But very similarly, yeah, those very small kind of bait fish or shrimp looking patterns that tend to stay towards the surface a little bit more.
Okay, one-aught hooks.
One-aughts, even size 1, depending on the hook. I'd say a lot of the size 1 tarpon specific patterns these days that are commercially tied, they are on the hooks that you want. So it might be a Tiemco SP600 or something like that nature, where it's the size you want for those fish that you're not going to lose them. There's even some size 2s out there that are appropriately sized for the fish, but I would stick somewhere in that, 1/0 to size 2, depending on the pattern. That'll be the best bet They just tend to hook those fish good, and they stay stuck. Where if you go 2-aught, I found with the juvenile tarpon over the years, a lot of 2-aughts tend to just so big that the gauge of the hook itself doesn't quite penetrate through the mouth. So the mouths are so bony. So you tend to lose a lot of fish that way if you don't hit them real hard, depending on the hook as well. But I'd stick in that range for sure.
Any other questions on the fish or the flies or the equipment from anyone?
I have a question about the fishing. Each guide, if we're fishing from a boat, will one angler fish at a time?
Correct. If you're fishing from the boat specifically, the pangas and the pangas down there are designed a little bit different from the pangas in Mexico. If you're familiar with those at all, they tend to be a little bit bigger, but generally speaking, you'll have one individual up on the bow of the boat that is actively looking for fish to cast to, and then there are certainly some areas where there's wadeable flats. I'd say that your generally highest catch rates tend to come from the boat, but if you and the person that you're fishing with is like, hey, let's do some wading, that can certainly be done, and you can be taken to some areas where you can go wade for bonefish or potentially find some permit. But generally speaking, yeah, if you can find out a pattern of switching from angler to angler off the bow of the boat, that's how most of it's done.
The other question I had was about the schedule. I peeked at the El Pescador. It seems they start their morning very early. Is there a reason for that? Is it the sun or the catch or?
With a lot of times with El Pescador, they do start the day fairly early. And I have seen where it's tide dependent as well. So if the tide just doesn't quite make sense for an early start, they might push you a little bit later and then have you get in a little bit later. But more times than not, they've just kind of operated that way. And I think what has been explained to me is that they like to afford individuals the ability to get back and kind of relax a bit before dinner and enjoy the amenities of the resort itself.
What's the typical run that you have in the morning to start fishing?
So that depends. I'd say you're anywhere. I mean, you could be fishing in the first 10 to 15 minutes, or like a big run is probably when you're heading south to Long Key. It might take you about an hour to get down there.
Right. Okay.
There are runs as you kind of head south on the ocean side, you cut through the key itself, and then you shoot up in the lagoon as you head back up north. And that might take you, I don't know, 30 to 40 minutes sometimes, just depending on how far you're running. And then ocean conditions, I will say as well, that can kind of dictate where I've had to go south, cut through, head north, and then just cut through where the Mexico-Belize border is, and then fish that northern half on the ocean side up top, just because the ocean conditions, we would get beat up too much trying to go north. Even though it was a much shorter drive, we were just, the way the ocean was, and the wind, I should say, just didn't make it so it was going to be an easy ride. So we did have to make one big loop, but just something to consider.
And the travel there, it said, to get there before 5 on what time will you be getting to the lodge on the travel day getting there?
So that depends on when your flight gets into Belize City. And then what they'll do is once they have your flight into Belize City, they'll base your next flight, the puddle jumper, if you will, from Belize City to San Pedro, based off that, your arrival time. And
Okay.
then it's just 15 minutes flight over. And then once you're there, you'll grab your luggage, you get picked up in the fast boat, and they'll run you 7 minutes to the lodge. So it pretty much depends on when you get into Belize City.
Okay. So yeah. Okay. All depends on when you get there. Not that there's going to be a single flight at some point in the day. Okay.
So I have a couple of questions. One is, what is the typical wind this time of year that we're going?
I feel like on average, and it's hard to, I guess, predict these days. It seems like weather conditions are consistently changing, and I don't expect any hurricanes that early, but even hurricanes in the last 2 to 3 years, we can't really get a ballpark on. But I'd say you're probably dealing with anything from 5 to like a max, maybe 18 to 20 miles an hour is kind of the average. So there's certainly some wind, but um,
Yeah, I'm just like, is it the wind? Is it, I mean, the windier time, not windier time? What about overcast, rainy, rainy season, not rainy season? I'm not sure what the period of what the uh, conditions are like the time we've got booked.
No, I hear you on that. Actually, April is one of those times that tends to be pretty nice overall. You might have some, I'd say, water spells that come through for sure. So definitely bring a jacket. That's pretty standard. Um, I'd say across the majority of the season, it's always nice to have a jacket when those thunderstorms came through and dump a little bit of water. But April tends to be fairly moderate overall in that upper north. As you head south, they tend to get a bit more rain down there, especially in kind of April, pushing into more May, June. They tend to get more water in the south, but I'd say in that northern section, it's not quite as bad.
It's hard. And the accommodations, are they all double occupancy, or they're singles, or what's the deal there?
The way that it's set up right now is based on double occupancy as far as everybody's rate is going into it, but they do have the ability to do single if you'd like. They can go that route.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Can you remind us what the rates are? Or have they been said yet?
The double occupancy has. I'm just going to hop in here real quick and make sure I got that correct for you guys. So I know based on the double occupancy currently, because you guys are doing, or the trip is set for April 26th through May 3rd, which is, so Belize does have taxes, but the base rate currently is $4,984, and then the Belize taxes on top of that, because they have a 9% hotel tax, and then they have a 12% GST tax as far as the tourism tax goes, and that equates to $418.74. So the grand total of the trip is $5,402.74.
And that's for 6 nights, 5 days of fishing.
Correct. Again, based on double occupancy.
And that's based on 2025 rates. So as long as we pay before some date, we keep those rates. And if we go longer, it goes to 26 rates. Is that correct?
That's correct. I've asked them when they plan on changing their rates, and they don't have a set date at this time. I would expect it probably in the next 2 to 3 months, somewhere in there. But based on what they have right now, these are the 2025 rates.
So it says the 26th through the 3rd. So that if you only fish 5 days, you've got a day. There's an extra day there. Are the dates wrong, or what? What am I missing?
So let me look at a calendar real quick. What you might be seeing is what they count in here.
Yeah, I had Landon. I had the 26th through May 2nd.
Okay, either I wrote it down wrong, or because I thought I took that off of what was sent to me.
Yeah, I had us fishing April 27th, 8th, 9th, and 30th, and May the 1st, which is a Friday. So arrive on Sunday, leave on Saturday is how I had it.
Yeah, because the invoice that was sent to me is the 26th through to 5:3. So you're saying it's the 5:2?
Yeah, we can get that straightened out. Yeah.
Yeah, oddly, I'm looking at it right here, and it's showing 6 nights, 5 days. Yeah, 6 nights, 5 days. Duration. 26th and May 3. Yeah, I don't want to waste too much of your time, but it is a 6 night, 5 day.
Okay.
So
And
arrival
then-
day is your first night, and then you'll have 5 days of fishing, and then you'll depart after that, the next day after that 5th day.
Right. And if we want to extend the trip, how does one go about doing that? Just talk to you, or?
Correct. Yeah, you'll contact me. I'll chat with the lodge, make sure that the space is available, and then basically from there, I can get you what the rate is for the full, or whatever you want to tack onto that, and then we can get you squared away.
Okay.
Bob, you said that there's the option for a non-fishing partner as well. How does that work rate-wise, or is that an option?
It's absolutely an option. Basically, they have a separate rate based on that. And I apologize. We do send a handful, but not enough for me to consistently remember. So my apologies there. But it tends to be because you aren't technically fishing. The only caveat, and I know Bobby and I have talked about this, is if you plan on bringing a non-angling spouse, or sorry, non-angling partner, and you plan on fishing, you either have to be prepared to pay for the boat to fish as a single, or have somebody that's willing to fish with you, if that makes sense. And let's see, I was trying to see if I had the non-angling rate in front of me, the immediate, but that's something I'll have to get from the lodge.
Yeah, what if we end up with an odd number in the group?
No, we're going to end up with an even number.
One way or the other, we will.
Yeah, we'll cut it off on an even, and somebody else wants to do it. We say, okay, you got to have 2 before you can go. So
Okay.
we'll cut it off. If everybody wants to fish with doubles, that's what we'll do. We'll cut it off, and then somebody else wants to join, then we'll say, okay, we got to find somebody else. So we'll have doubles.
Or if somebody volunteered to go as a single, could be the other
Right.
alternative.
Yeah, we'll get that. Yeah, and then everybody, I'm expecting you guys to have your own fishing partner. Say this is who I'm fishing with, so I don't have to deal with that like I've had to do in the past. So you say, hey, I'm fishing with so and so, that's who you're fishing with. And if you want to change, then you can work with somebody else to do that. That becomes a pain in the ass for me.
Do we plan on fishing the same guide the whole time, or rotating guides?
That'll be up to us.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'd say more times than not, they'll kind of go either route, just depending on what the group wants. But sometimes they don't mind having you with the same guide just because you start to learn that guide. But
Right. Yeah. The trade-off is being with different guides sometimes can be good, but at the same time, lots of times guides like having the same client for multiple days because they learn each other. Yeah.
so you can go either way for sure, just based on how you guys want to play that. I just looked again, and I think looking at my actual worksheet that I built for the trip, and I am seeing the April 26th through May 2nd with your departure on May 2nd. Oddly, my other system here is showing the 6 night, 5 day, but it's also showing a departure on the 3rd, which doesn't make sense overall. But no worries on that end. But you guys are squared away for departure on the 2nd. I just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, so guys, that'll be the 26th is on a Sunday. And then we'd fish Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then depart on May 2nd, which is a Saturday.
Is there anything to do if you wanted to fly in on Saturday? I mean, is it Is there anything nice to do on, like if you got in a day early?
So in Belize City itself, because the airport's actually located in Ladyville, which is right next to Belize City, you could absolutely stay down there. Um, to me, I mean, it's not like a ton to do. I've stayed there myself, and I went over to the museum, which I didn't find terribly exciting. There are a lot of tours heading into the mainland that are pretty cool. There's one that they call the ATM cave, and you float through it, and there's like crystallized skeletons and stuff of that nature from the Mayans that actually buried their people in there, and it ended up crystallizing. And there's a bunch of cool Mayan stuff, and there's Mayan ruins further inland. I'd say those tours, if you're interested in doing it, uh, they're a little bit further in mainland, so just be prepared for maybe an hour to 2 hour drive to get into those if it's something you
Right.
want. But I personally was kind of bummed I didn't spend a couple extra days to go do it myself because they look really cool. I'd suggest everybody kind of looking into that if that's something you're interested in. But you could absolutely stay in Belize City. There's some nice hotels in the downtown next to the main dock that's down there, right on the water. There's the Radisson or the Fort George. Now it used to be called the Radisson. It's the Fort George. That one's a really nice spot, but you could stay there and then go to tours out of there. San Pedro is pretty popular as far as tourism goes. There's a lot of expats down there from both the U.S. and Canada. And that's just kind of if you want to just hang out and kind of shop and hang out, drink, booze, whatever you want to do in that sense. It's more of that kind of scene.
Snorkeling is very good down there.
And that's as
Snorkeling.
well. Yeah. If you wanted to get out and see, they do some flyovers of the Blue Hole. The Blue Hole is not necessarily a snorkeling spot, but it's more of a diving spot. Just given that it's so deep, it does require more people to be scuba certified versus the snorkeling. So if you happen to have a scuba certification, absolutely.
So Landon, the price includes, once you land in Belize City, it includes the transfer, Tropic Air over to the lodge.
Correct.
It includes 3 meals a day. It
Correct.
includes your guide
Correct.
and some of the alcohol, the local alcohol, I think I said, right?
Yes, there's a very distinct list that they give you. So predominantly like rum drinks, cocktails are all included as part of that. Most of your beer, like the Belican, is the beer of choice down there. That's included. And then if there's like a specialty cocktail and wine, that, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, that is pay as you go. But yeah, predominantly most of it is included.
So then we have to pay for our flights to Belize City, anything we do in Belize City. And we have to pay gratuity to the guides. And we have to get a fishing license, Belize fishing license. Is that correct?
Correct. There is a website that you can go on and get your Belize fishing license for the week. A week long, I think, is these days it's about $50 for the week. I can't remember if they bumped it up to 70.
Okay.
But it's pretty straightforward.
Okay. And then a passport gets you in the country. You don't need a visa or anything else.
Correct. Just a passport, yeah.
Okay. Any more questions? Any other questions for Landon? And so all you got to do, he's already sent some people some packages. So all you got to do is say you want one, and Landon, and I'll send it to Landon, and we'll get more packages out to people. So we've got right now, we've got it blocked for 12 people. If we get 14, we'll take 14, but we've got it blocked for 12 right now. Okay. Anything else? Anybody? Anyone?
Good.
Landon, I greatly appreciate it, buddy.
Well, my pleasure. Yeah, if anybody needs anything, please feel free to reach out, and always happy to help.
All right, guys. Thank you, guys. See y'all.
Thank you.
See you, Bobby.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.